In this video, I'm going to take an example of a SQLAlchemy database of painters painting paintings, which has a one-to-many relationship. One step further in that I'm going to get the data from a JSON file. So let's get started. So we have a very simple database with two entities, painters and paintings, and we're going to express the relationship in the two directions. So always starting with like a painter creates many paintings. A painting is created by one painter. And so always start with A, and then over here, one of the sentences had many and one of them had one. So it was a one-to-many relationship. And that is done by creating the foreign key in the painting table. We want this sort of atomic behavior. So it was because the painting is created by one painter that makes it the table with the foreign key. Okay, so setting up basic SQLAlchemy. We have the create engine, the declarative base, the columns, the integers for the primary keys, the strings for just about everything else, the foreign key to establish the relationship within the database, the session maker to be able to interact with the database, put things in it, get things out of it. And then the relationship is going to be defined sort of at that class level so that, and we're not going to do much with it in this video still. We'll do it more in a different video. But it's going to allow us, the foreign key will be in the painting table and we'll refer back to the painter. But this is going to allow, at least in our, not maybe in the database, but in our class here over in Python, to say that the painter has some knowledge of painting. So we set up the database. If we did it this line 8 way, it would be an in-memory database. It would just sort of go away when we stop running the program. Here, we're actually saving something. Here is our painter class. I'm doing this fast because we've gone over this example before. It has an ID, which is integer in the primary key. The last name is a string. The first name is a string. The country is a string. The birth date and death date are strings because these are old dates and not sort of a more modern date that is supported by a database date type. And then we're saying that the painter has a relationship to painting that I'm going to call paintings. So this will be the painter's paintings. And then we have the painting class extends the base class. It's going to correspond to a table called paintings. It has a primary key, which identifies the painting. The painting has a title. It has a file name. And it has a foreign key. So in the painting table, it's going to, there is a field or a column named painter underscore ID, which is going to get its values from the painting table and then establish this relationship. Okay, set up the session. And now here's the new part. I'm importing JSON and OS, setting it up so I know the correct path. And then I've set up my file structure. Eventually, I'm going to bring in Flask. So I've set up in a very Flask sort of format. So I put my data in a static folder with a data subfolder and painting JSON. And so then I'm getting art from this JSON. So let's have a look at the JSON. So this JSON file is going to have data in with this same relationship. Let's see what that relationship looks like in JSON. So overall, I have a dictionary, and it has a property painters, which is a list, and then that list has other dictionaries. So overall, it's a dictionary, and then it's a list of dictionaries, of painter dictionaries. And painters have last names and first names and country icons and country names and birth dates and death dates. And then they have a property called paintings, which is another list of dictionaries. And these are painting dictionaries. And they have properties like title and file name. And there are no IDs here. That's more of a database thing. That's like a database idea. I mean, I could have IDs here, but I don't. They're sort of not necessary. It's the sort of, I don't know, interiority or something that paintings is within the painter dictionary. And that's what establishes the relationship here in JSON. So then I have a bunch of paintings for this particular painter, and then that's the end of paintings, and that's the end overall of the artist, and then I'm starting my next painter. Okay, so that's the way that the relationship is created in JSON, and then we've got to sort of read the JSON file, work through our understanding of that JSON, and then get it over into the corresponding database. So back to Python. So we have read art, we read the JSON, and we put it into a overall dictionary called art. And then it had a property painters, as we recall. It had a property painters, which was a list. So I can list over the art painters as a list, so I can loop over it. And at one point I was doing something with the I, with a counter, so I decided to enumerate this. And so I'll show you below. I have a nested loop, and at one point I'm using this I, and another point I'm not. One way is commented out. So at one point I was printing them out, and I was printing out the I, and I think I was displaying to a user, just in like a terminal user, oh, this was my first artist, my second artist or something. But I'm no longer doing that. So I don't know that I necessarily need this enumerate. But okay. So I'm looping over the list of painters. And so that is artist, and then artist has properties, last name, first name, etc. So this is my JSON with the property. And then those are also the properties, unsurprisingly, these are also the properties of my painter class. So this is the painter constructor, the sort of SQLAlchemy class, my extension of the SQLAlchemy base class. And we made a painter had properties like last name, first name, country, birth date, death date. So I'm getting that information from the JSON and assigning it to the variables of this constructor. And I'm making a painter, which I called A_painter. And then I've used my session to add it, and then I have flushed it. Not quite a commit, but the flush will establish an ID. I am not assigning an ID. If I were assigning an ID, then I might be using that I here in the loop to sort of to set my own ID, but I'm just relying on auto incrementing. And then because I'm relying on auto incrementing, but I want to use the ID in my, what's coming below is a nested loop, and I want to use this painter ID to establish a relationship to the paintings over in the database, then I am flushing so that I could get, so then I have access to an ID. Okay, so now I have, this loop was within the other loop, and I am looping over paintings. Again, in the JSON, I had a painters property, which was a list, And then I had, within a given painter, I had paintings, which was itself a list. So that's why I've ended up with a nested for loop. So now my artist is that particular artist. That artist has a property paintings, which is a list, so I can loop over it. And again, at one point I was playing games with the I's and the J's. And if I were assigning IDs, I might work with the J's, but I'm working with auto incrementing here in my database. So the enumerate and the J are sort of overkill here from some previous version of this program that was more terminal based and not anything to do with database. But I'm taking the properties of now a painting, like its title and its file name, and using the painting constructor and making a painting. And then I'm assigning that the foreign key painter underscore ID, assigning it to the painter ID. So I have my outer loop. In my outer loop, I get a painter, I do the flush to establish an ID, and then I'm getting my paintings foreign key from that primary key that I got in the outer loop. Commit, so that everything goes into the database. And so I have multiple painters like Edward Manet and his paintings, and Georges Seurat and his paintings, and Henri Rousseau and some paintings, and Gustav Klimt and some paintings, etc. So that's what I've got. And now I am querying again the two tables, not exploiting the relationship very much. I'm just going to write the two queries, one just the painter table, one just the painting table. No explicit joins, not relying on the relationship. When I say not relying on the relationship, I mean this. I'm not saying, oh, the painter has paintings. And we will do that another time. But here, my first query is just of the painter table, and I'm filtering it. And filter, again, is like a where clause in SQL, and I'm asking the painter ID to be number 2. So this is the table. So I'm filtering on the primary key. I'm identifying an artist and getting that. And still, just in general, queries don't normally give you a single row. So I'm using this method first to sort of tell the system I'm limiting down to just the one row. And then I'm printing out the various properties of that one row. In my second query here, I'm querying the painting table, and I'm filtering it. My where clause in this guy is, again, the painting table is the one with a foreign key. And so I'm filtering on a foreign key. And so I can have more than one. When I filtered on a primary key, I knew I was going to get one thing. That's how primary keys are. But now I am filtering on a foreign key, and so I can get a set of things. And so then I'm going to query all. So I'm going to look at all of the rows, all of the records, and I loop over them. And then I'm showing properties of the painting. And I'm just going to deal with the painter by the ID. So I'm not going to know this is my second painter. I said painter ID is 2, so that was Georges Seurat. But down here, I'm just going to say 2. I'm not going to know that it's Georges Seurat. And up here, when I am dealing with Georges Seurat, I am not going to list his painting. So I'm not really working too hard with the relationship provided by SQLAlchemy or any kind of a join. It's really just dealing with the two tables sort of individually. Okay, let's just run it. And there we go. There are the queries. So here's my first query. ID to the primary key in the artist table corresponds to Georges Seurat, who's from France. And then in my painting query, paintings 6 through 11 were by Georges Seurat. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Most of this we had in a previous example in terms of the database, but the new thing was seeing this data in this different format, this JSON format, and getting it from the JSON format over into the database and then querying the database. Okay, thanks for your attention.